Today we're talking the top buys and sells for fantasy football ahead of week 5. I recommend watching the video all the way through because at the end, I'm going to go in a rapid fire mode to give you 3 bonus buys and 3 bonus sells. Also, make sure you're using our trade calculator, yardsperfantasy.com, to make sure you get the best deals on your week 5 trades. Let's go. My first buy for fantasy football in week 5 is Austin Ekeler. Austin Ekeler hasn't played since injuring his ankle in week 1. However, signs point towards a week 6 return. Ekeler returned to practice on a limited basis heading into week 4, and the Chargers are on a bye in week 5. That gives Austin Ekeler over a month of rest and rehab to get his ankle back to health. He will likely return to a significant role despite a somewhat difficult schedule over the next 8 weeks with matchups against the Cowboys, Jets, Lions, Packers, Ravens, and Patriots. However, he gets the Bears in week 8, a shootout with the Chiefs in week 7, and the Broncos' joke of a defense in week 14. And then in the fantasy playoffs, he's going to get the Raiders in week 15, a shootout with the Bills in week 16, and the Broncos again in the fantasy championship. Ekeler will benefit from the absence of Mike Williams as the team is sure to lean on their versatile running back for more targets. And we saw that last year when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were missing games. Ekeler's target shares ballooned and he was dominant for fantasy football. And we can assume Ekeler's going to see more red zone work as well with the big-bodied Mike Williams not available for those jump balls in the end zone. The Chargers have been one of the highest scoring offenses in the NFL through the first month of the season, and that will only be better with a healthy Austin Ekeler. He should be one of the most productive running backs in fantasy football through the rest of the season. So if the team in your league that drafted Austin Ekeler is getting impatient, they're losing games, they can't afford to wait through his bye week, they might be willing to sell, go make him an offer. I'm also buying Isiah Pacheco in fantasy football ahead of week 5. In case you haven't noticed, Isiah Pacheco is the RB1 in Kansas City. He's dominating the snaps and he's averaging nearly 100 yards from scrimmage per game. The only concern with Isiah Pacheco coming into the season was the presence of Jerick McKinnon, particularly in the passing game. Yet Pacheco is even out targeting Jerick McKinnon. Isiah Pacheco has scored as an RB1 in fantasy football in each of the last 2 weeks as the team has shown no hesitancy to lean on him to salt away wins. He has taken 35 carries over those 2 games with 6 targets. Looking at the upcoming schedule, the next 5 weeks should be very productive for Pacheco in the Chiefs offense. In week 5, they head to Minnesota to play a Vikings defense that has basically been Swiss cheese against every opponent other than the struggling Panthers. Then it's the Broncos, a shootout with the Chargers, and then the Broncos again. They also still have 2 games against the Raiders, including one in the fantasy playoffs, the Bengals, and shootouts with the Dolphins, Eagles, and Bills. On an offense that is struggling to find someone to step up in the passing game outside of Travis Kelce, they seem to be more willing to lean on the run game than in years past. That will help Pacheco make the most of his opportunities and to take advantage of a favorable schedule. And if you believe Isiah Pacheco runs through the Vikings defense in week 5, then you can play this pick'em on Underdog Fantasy. Lock in your pick now or draft a whole starting lineup for week 5 on Underdog Fantasy and use promo code YARDSPER to get a $100 deposit match and a free mystery pick'em. Chris Olave has not quite met expectations to start the season. Yet he scored 19.2, 14.6, and 18.4 fantasy points over the first 3 weeks. And he did that without scoring a touchdown, but more on that in a minute. After double-digit targets and a target share of 31% or better in each of the first 3 games, Chris Olave was a massive disappointment in week 4 with just 1 catch on 6 targets. Now, I think we can chalk that up to a clearly injured Derek Carr. He just did not look right out there. And the peripheral numbers have been mostly excellent for Chris Olave, including that brutal week 4 performance. His target share in that game was the lowest of the season, but he was 4th in air yards, though most were unrealized. And for the season, his target share is still about 25%. He still hasn't scored a touchdown, but those are going to come. He is second to Jamar Chase in the most targets without a touchdown in the entire NFL. Another week of recovery for Derek Carr should help him get healthy and back to being able to hit Chris Olave down the field. The Saints will play the Patriots, who just lost their number 1 corner and their top pass rusher in week 5, and the Texans in week 6. And looking ahead to the end of the season schedule, Chris Olave will have favorable matchups against the Giants, Rams, and Bucks in the fantasy playoffs. Assuming things normalize, Chris Olave will be a high-end wide receiver too when it's all said and done. My top sell for week 5 fantasy football is Jahan Dotson. The 2023 season has not been what Jahan Dotson enthusiasts had thought it would be, but maybe they should have known better. Dotson's advanced receiving metrics were largely pedestrian during his rookie season outside of his touchdown rate. He was outside the top 60 wide receivers in both targets per route and yards per route, while commanding just 16% of the targets. Those numbers have only gotten worse in 2023, and now the touchdowns haven't been there to save the day. Well, that is until week 4. Dotson had his third game with fewer than 30 receiving yards, but his late game touchdown salvaged the day to give him 12.7 fantasy points. Now that touchdown opened the opportunity to sell Jahan Dotson to any sucker in your league who is still hanging on to last year's unsustainable rate. So take advantage if he's on your roster. As the third wide receiver in a Sam Howell offense, Jahan Dotson cannot be trusted for many more double-digit fantasy point performances. So if you don't sell him and you hold him instead, I guarantee you will end up dropping him by week 8. Don't be the sucker. Sell now. Speaking of suckers, remember when Quentin Johnston declared himself as the wide receiver 3 ahead of Josh Palmer way back in the spring? Not only was that not true at the time, we're sitting here in week 5 and it's still not the case. I mean, I guess technically he's the number 3 now by default with the Mike Williams injury, but he's still well behind Josh Palmer. And it's not like Josh Palmer is a super talented wide receiver. He is replacement level, and Johnston is a first-round pick. But Quentin Johnston was an overrated prospect coming out of TCU. I mean, I told you this back in the summer. He fell short on a number of things that we look for analytically for wide receiver prospects. But even the eye test tells you that this guy was going to struggle in the NFL. First are the drops. He had bad drop issues in college, and those have carried over to the NFL already. He runs a very limited route tree, mostly consisting of vertical patterns, yet he doesn't quite have the speed to dominate those types of routes like he did at the college level. And everyone wants him to be the one-for-one replacement for Mike Williams, given his 6'3" frame. But that is just not his game. For one, he's 10 pounds lighter than Mike Williams, and his playstyle doesn't make sense for that comp either. Mike Williams is a contested catch machine. That's what he does. That's his game. Quentin Johnston, though, very clearly struggles in contested situations. Rather than high pointing the football, he lets the ball come to him, which often results in a pass breakup, especially against NFL caliber cornerbacks. Now, I don't know if we can call him a bust quite yet, but it's clear that Quentin Johnston is just not ready to play a significant part in an NFL offense right now. We can make the excuse that he was behind Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Josh Palmer in the first couple of weeks, but he's now had 5 quarters since the Williams injury to step up, and he's yet to do it. In week 4, Quentin Johnston was running as the distant third wide receiver to Keenan Allen and Josh Palmer. He ran 9 fewer routes and he saw just a 12.5% target share. And he caught 1 pass for a career high 18 yards. Like I said, maybe it's too soon to declare him a bust, but things are certainly trending that way already. And there are some leagues where you won't be able to sell Quentin Johnston for anything at this time. But there are also plenty of Quentin Johnston stands who believe in him and they think he's going to be the next Mike Williams and are chalking up the slow start to him being a rookie. They believe and they will pay up to go get him. If one of those people are in your league, you should be listening to their offers. Before we get to the bonus buys and sells for week 5, if you're enjoying this video and you find it at all valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'm pumping out content like this all season long. And drop your trade questions in the comments. I'll try to get to all of them. Welcome to rapid fire mode. It's the bonus buys. And we're going to start with Josh Palmer. We just got done trashing Quentin Johnston. This guy is not it. But Josh Palmer has proven to be productive and valuable when he's put in a significant role in that Chargers offense. And now he's the wide receiver too. Now we do have to factor in the pending return of Austin Ekeler, which is going to affect Josh Palmer's target shares. And that's why he wasn't one of my main buys. He's just a bonus buy. But he's absolutely still worth going to get. He's the wide receiver 2 in the Justin Herbert offense. That offense is playing well. Justin Herbert is playing well. It really shouldn't cost you a ton to go get him. He'll be a valuable piece, especially through bye weeks and injuries. I'm buying Josh Palmer. I'm also buying Patrick Mahomes. He's gotten off to a good start to the season, but he hasn't been great. He's the QB8 in fantasy points. Yet it's Patrick Mahomes. We know what he's capable of, especially now that Travis Kelce's getting more and more healthy. Rashee Rice is starting to establish himself in that wide receiver core. And like we talked about with Isiah Pacheco, that upcoming schedule is incredibly favorable for the Chiefs offense. They play the Vikings, Broncos, Chargers, and the Broncos again over the next 4 weeks. And then after that, it's the Dolphins, and you know that game's going to be a shootout. Tons of fantasy points coming. I'm also buying Jamar Chase. Now, it's well documented at this point that Bengals offense, quarterback Joe Burrow, has just not been right. And I don't know if it's ever going to get right during the 2023 season. But that doesn't mean that Jamar Chase won't be productive. He's still commanding a high volume of targets. They are feeding him the football. Now, he's not picking up those big chunk plays, those big 30, 40, 50-yard touchdowns. He's more of a compiler, which is less exciting. But we're not buying him to be that guy that we thought we were getting when we drafted him number 1, number 2, number 3 overall in the summer. But he can still be very, very productive. And he's pretty attainable right now because people are panicking about the Bengals offense. Now, he's probably going to give you more of like that Amon-Ra St. Brown level of production, which is fine because we're not paying the old Jamar Chase price to get him. However, he still has that ceiling of the guy that we were drafting at the top of drafts back in August. Because if Joe Burrow gets healthy and that Bengals offense gets right, which isn't crazy to think that it happens, all of a sudden, you have a top 2 wide receiver in fantasy football on your team. It's really a no-risk, super high reward move to make, so I'm trading for Jamar Chase. For my bonus sells, I am starting with Derrick Henry. I talked about Derrick Henry as a sell in last week's video, and then of course he goes off and has his best week of the season. But I'm standing behind it because that Titans offense is still bad. The offensive line is still bad, and Tyjae Spears is still seeing a over 50% snap share. The Titans just happen to have a really good positive game script in week 4. So they were able to feed Derrick Henry like we're used to seeing. And yet, even with them blowing out the Bengals, Tyjae Spears still played 53% of the snaps. But again, this is a bad Titans team. Don't forget about that. They're going to be in negative game scripts more often than not. And through the first 3 weeks, that has meant a lot of Tyjae Spears and not much Derrick Henry. So last week he was a sell low. Now he's a sell high. I'm begging you to take advantage. I'm also selling high on Khalil Herbert. This is another bad offense, bad offensive line. And Khalil Herbert is certainly no Derrick Henry either. Now he still has Roshan Johnson knocking at the door behind him, even though the snap shares and opportunities didn't really look that way in week 4. There's a very good chance that Justin Fields turns back into a pumpkin when they have to start playing real NFL defense again. And that means we're going to get the same Khalil Herbert that we saw in the first 3 weeks. And that guy was giving you nothing. So take advantage of this opportunity right now, coming off a good game, because he's not going to have many more of those to sell Khalil Herbert. Hey, if you like that video, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment on what you want me to talk about next. You can find all my stuff, my rankings, articles, podcasts, more videos like this on yardsperfantasy.com. Just download the Yards Per Fantasy app, and we thank you for your support.